For this week's first edition of Targets in Focus, I'm joined by one of our regular contributors to DukascopyTV, Anders Eklof. He's a senior FX strategist at Swedbank in Stockholm. Now, Anders, you spent 5 years working at Riksbank in the monetary policy department, so I'm sure you know a little bit about their thinking process. At the moment, they are doing well in initiating financial reform in an attempt to head off the European debt crisis, and for the moment are enjoying borrowing costs even lower than Germany. What do you think will be the central bank's next moves over the next few months, and how do you see the Swedish krona performing against the US dollar and indeed the euro in the short, mid and long term?
Let's start with the Riksbank here. I mean, obviously the market is pricing 100 basis points cut over the next year, starting in December. So like a 25% basis points cut is already priced. We now expect to see the Riksbank cutting rates in line with market expectations, and we have revised our forecast from earlier having had unchanged interest rates. The Riksbank has in their path like unchanged interest rates. However, we think now that they will move towards a cut, and we think it's a very close call for December cut. The Swedish economy is rather strong in the third quarter. Next week GDP numbers will be stronger than the Riksbank had expected. Still, the leading indicators are definitely pointing to that the Swedish economy is slowing. Not rapidly, but it's clearly slowing, and there are big risks to the downside in the growth perspective due to the euro crisis. And when it comes to the Swedish krona, I think the current market sentiment, with extremely little to put in place for getting some risk on in this type of markets, of course, Swedish krona is a bit sensitive. So we see actually in the very short term a move up to 9.35 at least, and perhaps even higher. That said, I think that given the criteria of the crisis here, that market sees positive but want to buy assets and currencies that doesn't have these type of problems. So I think we see some stability and moving back to the Swedish krona. So we have like 9.15 in euro stock in like 3 months. So we expect continued stability, and we don't expect repeating of the 2008 move in the krona, because then it was like Swedish banks were in the focus of the problems, and that's not the case now.
What about the euro dollar? The European debt crisis is not even close to being solved or finding a solid solution. So at what level and range do you see the euro dollar trading in through to year's end and into next year?
We don't see a near end to the euro-dollar sell-off. We've had a forecast now on 130. Obviously, we are already there almost. So, but we see like 130 to 125 in like 3 to 6 months perspective. It's like obvious that we have to revise according to the market movements here. But one part of the solution or easing of the crisis for the euro debt crisis is definitely a weaker euro, and we expect that the ECB will move along those lines and cut interest rates. And we expect in the very short term that they will discipline the Italian governments and so on to come up with some reforms and not go buying heavily in the Italian bond market. But if there are some signs that they are have more credible reforms taking decision on that, then in the very end we can definitely see some QE from the ECB. But then they will have to tell the story that it's needed because of the price stability target, and they will have to revise forecast and so on. So that's not now, that's like further out.
And finally, Anders, before we run out of time, let's move across to the other side of the Atlantic now and discuss one of the antipodean currencies. How are you expecting the Aussie dollar to trade over the next year?
In the very short term here, also we expect to see further weakness in the Aussie dollar, perhaps all the way down to 0.90, even if that's not our headline forecast. That said, we believe in a structural build in commodities, and like 12 months out, or like even 3 to 6 months out, we can see actually Aussie dollar higher, and we see you move back to 105, like let's say six months time. So. And that's based on the story of structural growth and bid for in Asia and bid for commodities actually.
Thank you very much for those forecasts there, Anders. Now, as always, there'll be more editions of Targets in Focus throughout the week to keep you updated on the latest currency projections from top banks around the world. Goodbye for now.